Okay.
So this session is about tensions common to dilemmas, and just a word that we're kind of piloting these frames, but we thought that it would be helpful to just talk together as you've been using dilemmas and the implementation of the lesson plans, and our project focuses on dilemma discussions, which we know we have some resources about, but we've been doing a lot of thinking about what different kind of common, I guess, to use that word again, common or shared tensions there are across dilemma discussions or dilemma situations. And so that's what we're going to be focusing on today is sharing a few different frames of I guess like common problems that are really across the dilemmas. So just a word to start is that dilemmas are common as we've seen. They happen all the time in different circumstances, different environments. And oftentimes they have these really like civic dimensions about how we relate to groups that we're a part of or to the wider society that we're a part of. So tensions regarding the relationship between the individual and the group are experienced by many people, if not all of us, across the world in different ways. And these tensions are common at work and in civic life, as I said. And then finally, students might already be experiencing or thinking about these types of situations in their lives, no matter their age. So because these situations are so prevalent, students will probably already have some experience, regardless of how young they are, thinking about these. How do I relate to the group? What does it mean for me to be an individual versus my membership in something, and what kinds of tensions arise when those kinds of things are maybe going on in parallel or rubbing against each other. So to start, we just wanted to have you read through the following dilemmas. And Shelby, I'll give just like a little preview of each, but we're going to put you into breakout groups of about 3 each, and talk about one of these dilemmas just to kind of get you warmed up. And there's no right or wrong answers to what you might see in these dilemmas. There's really just a chance in breakouts to talk about what these dilemmas look like to you. What do you see really being at the heart of each of them? So I'll walk through with the first one, Shelby, if you want to.
Yes, sorry.
So the first dilemma is about this CEO of an internet startup company, and she's planning a conference, but she decides to move the conference due to some anti-LGBT legislation in the place where she had planned it to be, and she upsets her other employees as a result. She's worried about losing money in the company, but she feels that it's the right thing to do to move the conference. So that's one situation. There's this second situation. So this student who's in graduate study in genetics, he is working on trying to produce data, and he sends some new data that is basically in contrast with some data at another organization to someone at that organization. And then it turns out that the organization kind of stole his data, which disappoints him. So he's not getting credit when they post the data online. And the next situation. So then there's this one about a woman who works at the World Economic Forum. I think this one might be in the lesson plan, so you might have already seen this, but she is going to speak at the World Economic Forum. She is a nonprofit executive, and she has to break a picket line of strikers in order to go speak, because there's picketers outside. And even though she works in labor relations, she's wondering if she should do that because it's kind of against her vision of what it means to be an activist. So that's the third one, sorry. And then the fourth one is about an Asian American actress who's kind of deciding what role to take on and what roles to play. Should she further her career and take a stereotypical role, or should she not? That's the decision that she's kind of weighing, working as an actress. So those are the 4 scenarios. And basically what you can do in breakouts is just pick one of these for yourself to talk about with your group members, and just chat about, what do you see as really lying at the heart of this dilemma? What's causing the tension? Again, no right or wrong answers to this, just a chance for us to kind of get warmed up and discuss with one another. And you can also introduce yourselves in your group. So I will put you into breakout rooms with that. Let me just do that quickly.
May I ask
Yes.
if each one of us needs to pick up one different dilemma, or do we need to discuss one dilemma as a group?
You should discuss one dilemma as a group. If you have extra time, you can always pick a second dilemma. It'll be about 10 minutes that we're putting you into
Right.
notes for. So just decide together on one dilemma to discuss, whichever one kind of strikes you the most. And if you feel like you
Okay.
exhaust that discussion, you can discuss another one. And Shelby put the link as well into the chat so that you have all 4 of these to access.
Okay.
Move you around. Just getting the breakout rooms ready. Okay, great. So there will be a couple groups of 3 and 1 group of 2, and I will open the rooms now.
We'll have about 8 to 10 minutes, right, Danny?
Yes, yeah, I was going to do it for 10 minutes. If
Okay,
that sounds good.
great.
Okay,
Have fun.
all right. Thank you for the couple of you who contributed and shared your answers of what you were thinking about in the breakout. We're going to go back and I'll turn it over to Shelby just to talk about sort of why we had you discuss these dilemmas and what we're going to bring in terms of frames to analyze them a little bit.
Great. Thanks, Danny. So we are going to be talking about a few frames for tensions that are actually not our frames. So we want to give credit to both the people that we're going to be talking about. So first of all, we're going to be talking about tensions that we bring to you from the C4 project at Project Zero. Our colleagues Flossie and Mara are part of this project. And this actually comes out of work that they did with teachers in Australia who are working on using civic competencies with their students. We're trying to actually get them involved in civic engagement in their communities with their students. And they really realized as they were doing this work with them that these civic tensions kept coming up over and over with the students as they were doing this work. So that's where these tensions really come from originally. But we were talking with our colleagues and realized these were some frames that we thought would actually be useful in thinking about dilemmas as well. But that's why we're piloting this, and we're really interested to get your feedback because they're not tensions or frames that we've really used with our dilemmas before. And these are tensions that can appear in different ways in different communities. And we don't really want you to think of them as absolute binaries. They're something that you might be experiencing both sides of the tension at once. You can both feel both elements of it. You might be feeling, some side and a little bit of the other side. So it's not necessarily an absolute like either or. And we really want to emphasize that. And that's something that our colleagues also really emphasized with us. So the first tension that comes out of that work is independence versus interdependence. So really this idea of, are you taking care of your own needs and making sure that you're responsible for decisions, or do you understand yourself as part of a whole, part of as a community, and you're making decisions together, and you're part of your environment versus you're an individual in your environment. And an example of this is a business person who debates moving to a new place far from their family for a career opportunity. So they're being an individual versus remaining close to their family to help with their needs of the local business. So they're trying to make sure that they're being part of their family and their community, and they're thinking about their family in their decision making. A second tension is uniqueness versus belonging. And we have to admit, this is one that we've really struggled with. So we actually really would value your feedback on this. This was not the original name of the tension. We've just really struggled with how to rename it. And it's the idea that understanding that each individual is distinct and recognizing their individual differences versus finding value in your membership to a group. So for example, a student who is required to wear a uniform and takes pride in showing that they go to this particular school versus a student who struggles with the uniform and wants to use clothing as a form of individual expression. But it can also go further than that. And I would say why we've struggled with it, because it's also something like, I might say that I am proud to be a woman and I identify as a woman broadly and I belong to that group, but I also want to be acknowledged for my individual differences and I don't want to be stereotyped as a woman. So that's why it can sometimes get into these elements of stereotypes and what it means to be both an individual, but part of an overall group. The third tension is self-care versus stewardship. So putting your own self first at some place and making sure that you're protecting your own happiness, particularly during times of stress, versus really committing yourself responsibly to the world, to take care of others, to protect the world, to protect people, and really putting that first. So for example, a nurse who struggles with how to care for their own health and mental well-being during long shifts versus giving all their energy to their patient care and needs. So this came up a lot during the pandemic, for example. Should I be putting my own health and safety first, or should I be putting the needs of my patients first? And then I do versus we do. This is something we really adapted from the C4 framework, but really this idea of, are you using your own power and influences to act on the behalf of others? So are you the one making the decisions on behalf of others versus are you working in a collective with others? So are you understanding your own power to be part of something that you're making decisions with your community? It's very similar to individualism versus interdependence, but it's more about decision making rather than how you see your own identity. So an activist who must decide whether to speak at a high-profile conference about her cause, even though her collaborators are against it, versus working with her collaborators to raise their collective voices by protesting together. And then I'm going to turn it over to Danny to quickly talk about 3 other paradigms for understanding ethical dilemmas, but these come from the literature more broadly, from this man Kidder, who came up with these 3 paradigms, which we also thought might be helpful. Take it away, Danny.
Thanks, Shelby. So as Shelby mentioned, these are from Rushworth Kidder's work. He founded something called the Institute for Global Ethics. And in addition to the C4 dilemmas that Shelby presented, we thought that these 3 frames would be helpful in addition for thinking through what kinds of tensions lie really at the heart of these dilemma discussions. So the first one, if you want to go to the next slide, Shelby. Paradigm 1 is about truth and loyalty. So truth being conforming to facts or reality, or really seeing yourself working in pursuit of truth or finding out what is valid, versus loyalty, maybe holding allegiance to a person, a group, a government, or a set of ideas to which you owe fidelity. So really those 2 things being sometimes in tension with one another. And an example could be, so a salesperson maybe who has been with a company for many years, who's aware of issues with a new product, but grapples whether to sell it anyway, maybe feeling an obligation to the team that they're a part of or the company that they've worked for many years, versus maybe raising awareness about problems with the product and it not being ready for the market, which would be an example of more truth-telling. So again, this kind of idea of the relationship you have with the group that you're a part of versus what might be true or what might be in accordance with facts. Then the second paradigm is about short-term versus long-term thinking. So short-term being seeking satisfaction of current or immediate needs, focusing on what's in the here and now, and what that requires versus long-term thinking. So being responsible to the future or caring about future needs that might not be here yet, but that you can anticipate. And an example of this might be a policymaker making environmental decisions about pesticides. This is just an example that might quickly raise food prices if that regulation is put in place in the short term. So that being maybe the short-term concern in the immediate now, versus delaying regulation, which risks water pollution many years from now. So that being something that's going to happen probably in the future, but how do you grapple with these two concerns? And then finally, the third paradigm is this idea of justice and mercy. So justice being sticking by principles and rules that are fair without really applying attention to context or the personalities or situations that you might be faced with in applying justice versus mercy. So trying to care for the particular needs of individuals, what kinds of situations they are particularly in case by case, and seeking to be more benevolent or compassionate rather than just applying rules of justice. So again, an example of this might be, so a teacher, maybe who's not sure whether to fail a student who missed many classes because that's the policy and that seems like the just thing to do according to the rules, versus maybe giving the opportunity for the student to do some makeup work since the student had a tough family situation. So taking that into account, that that's the individual's context and giving them a little bit of mercy in that situation. So this is a lot. We know we just gave you, I guess, 7 new tensions in total, 4 from the C4 group about civic tensions and 3 from Kidder's paradigms. But this chart kind of summarizes everything that we talked about. So what we're going to do is put you back into those same breakout groups, and you can choose a different dilemma from the one that you just talked about. And have a discussion about how you see maybe these tensions or paradigms being present in the dilemma situation that you choose. So what I'm going to do is I will put this table into the chat so that you have it. Let me do that now.
You're also welcome to take a screenshot.
So this is the chart that outlines all of these 7 tensions, not 4 tensions, the chart that outlines all of those. And then just as a reminder, here is the link where you can find the dilemmas themselves. So I will put you back into breakout rooms. And again, your goal is just to discuss one of these 4 dilemmas, preferably one that you did not choose in the last breakout, and see how are these tensions present, which tension might be the strongest. And also you can think about how might you discuss these with your students. You could kind of take that meta lens or angle. What types of reactions do you think these frameworks would get from your students if you prefer to talk about that as well? Any questions before we go into breakouts?
So before we end, we wanted to introduce to you a handout related to this, and see, you're all welcome to use this handout and pilot it yourselves if you're interested in that. I'm going to put the link in here right now. So this is me being very visual. I'm a very visual learner, and a lot of my colleagues think this is a very confusing handout. So I will put that out there now. I tried to put a model at the end, but this is why I'm putting it out there. It's a pilot. Feedback is welcome. Critique it all you want. But what it is just, I'll share my screen quickly. Again, it's trying to take the learners through the different tensions. This is actually only the first 4 tensions because it seemed confusing enough just doing those 4. Taking them through the first 4 tensions. And then it's actually asking them to map, basically reading any dilemma, map where they think that the character is on these dilemmas in terms of how strong they feel like they are on the different sides, and noting that they can be on both sides. They don't have to be on one side or the other, as we said. So for example, and then they can actually put them all together on a map. And just as we were talking about, sometimes these interact, and it's a way to sort of visually look at how the tensions can actually be really interacting with one another. So just quickly, as you'll see down here below, I give an example of a dilemma, and it's not the prettiest thing, but I note here how I was doing some of my own mapping. And then I give an example of how I mapped the dilemma myself visually. So I'm going to stop my share. As I said, this is a pilot. This is a handout that I made with my own mind on how I see this, but would love to hear your feedback about it if you want to use it with your students. So I'll put it out there.
I was saying there's no right answer to these dilemmas. And I think that's absolutely true and can definitely be difficult for students. I totally see what you mean, Katarine, with students coming to you and saying, okay, but what's the right thing to do? I want to know the answer. I think something that we talk about on the project is we're not even trying to get people to a right answer, and there isn't one particular right answer, but it's the sensitivity to come to these situations, to be asking the right questions and arrive at an answer that does take into account maybe the 3 E's as a guidepost. That's what we use most commonly. But I think why we're introducing these tensions is just to have more ways to analyze a situation, to say, okay, what's really going on here? How can I think through what is at the heart of why this is a difficult situation for this person? How does this relate to things that I've experienced? And also then, how can I think through what is going on, what is going to help me dissect what's at the heart of the situation for this person, and then how can maybe I recommend or make the best decision in light of that. And there isn't one answer to that. Even if you use all of these tensions, students might come, and we all might come to different answers as to what the person might do. And that's just the complexity, I think, of real life and every situation that we face. There isn't often one right thing, and we can think creatively about ways to handle things and get ourselves out of certain situations, or ways to balance the 3 E's. But I think, yeah, my answer is just, it's making people aware of and sensitive to these frames as ways to handle situations. I don't know what you would say, Shelby.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would say I certainly like the idea of the 3 E's as a guidepost, where we're really hoping that, people understand the 3 E's as something that we're aiming for. And, when you're thinking about making a decision about a dilemma, is my decision in accordance with the 3 E's? Am I making a decision that, leads me towards, being excellent, ethical and engaged? I think but I think, as Danny said, having these different frames, like the frames we talked about in terms of values and responsibility, and now these tensions, it does give you a way to think more deeply about how to make a decision about the dilemma that will lead you towards being ethical, excellent, and engaged, is sort of how I think about it. But yeah, I mean, I think, as he said, we're hoping that this makes students more sensitive to being able to think about those elements. And then, we deliberately, as a project, do not make a statement about what it means to be ethical, in terms of this is the right ethical decision, because we do work with people all over the world. And as we talked about in our ethical PD, people do have different senses of moral foundations and values and things like that. But we're hoping that this gives them the tools to think about, these are different tensions that are coming up. Let's discuss those. There usually is there's no right answer, but there's often a better answer. There's an answer that is more aligned with excellence, ethics, and engagement. And so we want them to be able to think things through and think, you know what, I think this is probably more in line with the 3 E's. I think that's what I would say.